wild weather heading this way, I guess. Kauai and Oahu are getting belted this morning, big time. Prediction of 14 inches of snow for the mountains here with up to 120 mile an hour winds. Hey, now that's a storm. Anyway, talk about storms. Today I wanted to talk about the future of cannabis in America. It is a confusing, crazy, Wild West topic. It's chopped up, and everywhere you go, there's different rules and so on. It's really, right now, it's in a state of complete nuttiness. I stay in contact with my representatives. I highly recommend everybody else out there, especially here in Hawaii, where things are really quite local. I know my representative on a first name basis. Talk to him. Yeah, let them know what you feel. Tell them. Don't be a jerk about it, but every time I get something, that I think I need to discuss, I get on the email, and I go to Joy and I send her stuff. And the Washington people too, at least locally here, I get a response, and the response is actually usually typed by the person that I addressed too, so I get some good answers. Anyway, here on the island, I know that our representatives in Puna have been for years now writing and promoting cannabis legalization bills for recreational use. This has been ongoing. But, the past governor there, he was pretty soft, and he wasn't going to sign anything that didn't, follow up with the federal laws. And, of course, the federal laws are still, whether Biden let them guys out of prison or not, it's still Schedule 1 on federal laws. So, they haven't wanted to go there. And there's also been a rather conservative group in Oahu that, still carry the reefer madness around right there, afraid that the society will fall apart if we allow legalization of cannabis. Well, hey, I don't know about anywhere else, folks, but Hawaii is the only state I've ever been in that actually had its own land race that predates all of this cannabis cultivation. It was called Maui Wowie. I think it's almost extinct today, but it's a long history here. And so if society was going to fall apart, sorry, folks, did it already. Too late. Anyway, the reason I decided to bring this subject up is because all of a sudden now, on the roadside, we have cannabis seed vendors showing up. Now, there's a long, long history around here in Puna and the Mahilo area where we've had people parking along the roadsides in public spaces, and they'd be selling tamales, or they're selling pastales, or you find the fish guys, the fishermen, and Ellen follows the fishermen around and picks up fresh fish that way, right off the roadside here. You see poi balls, marlin dip, Ukrainian fried pies, and so on. So this is very common. It's more common here than any place I've ever been. I really don't even know how much regulation, there is on it. It's pretty lax. But seeing tamales on the roadside's one thing. Seeing guys with long hair sitting under canopies selling cannabis seeds is another story. Like I say, the laws are fragmented, Wild West, crazy, and very difficult to interpret, too. I know I dropped in on one of these guys out of curiosity, and of course, first thing, he's got little handbills there stating, in 2022, the DEA did pull hands off. No more messing with the cannabis seed, the DEA says. Didn't matter whether it was industrial hemp seed or whether it was seed for, for drug use. Cannabis seed is as legal to sell federally as tomato seed. So whatever process you need to go through to sell tomato seeds, you can do so according to the federal government. And now, of course, the federal government tends to trump, wrong word, federal government tends to supersede, state laws when push comes to shove in a court. But Hawaii's got their own laws, and originally, they did not allow seeds or clones to be sold through the medical marijuana dispensaries here. And to the best of my knowledge, the last I checked, the ones at least around Hilo still do not. And I'm not exactly sure there. I really almost need to contact my representative and clarify this for me. They have, like I said, been busy writing bills to recreational legalize here, and so they're kind of deep into it to find out exactly what is the legality here locally, because I know the dispensaries don't and claim they can't sell. Now I know one thing for sure, this for sure: if you're growing cannabis seed in Hawaii, if the seed is produced locally, you only have two choices. If it's industrial hemp, you have to have one of those industrial permits, okay, that they issue here. If it's drug hemp, you have to have a medical card. You cannot produce cannabis seed in Hawaii without a medical permit. Why? Because you can't have a cannabis plant here without one. Now, I haven't dropped in on the other vendor that popped up with this seed recently, but I did stop in on one guy and have a talk with him. I didn't ask him if he had a medical card to produce the seed. So, he was of the impression that he was scot-free because of the federal regulations, which isn't necessarily true. So anyway, this whole thing, what is the future? What is the future? I have guys here on the island who have some amazing collections of genetics in cannabis. Oh, I mean, amazing. This stuff would make Jim Belushi and Dan Aykroyd drool. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with, Belushi's got his farm out there in Oregon where he's working with original land races like Michoacan and Panama Red. These things that you guys that are over 60 might remember. If you're over 70, you know them for sure. It used to be the major market, so it's up and coming, man. Now, one of the things though that really concerns me, and it's one reason that I've actually been talking with my representatives over here, that almost every one of the states that I checked on, I don't know all the story, but on most of them, like Illinois, okay, where recreational is legal, California, where recreational is legal, Washington, okay, recreational is legal, you cannot grow cannabis in those states unless you have a medical marijuana permit. Or you have a license issued by the state for the cultivation of. So you're either a professional cultivator and you have a license, or you have a medical permit and you're allowed to produce the crop. But California, which had some of the first medical marijuana in the country, and now has some of the earlier recreational marijuana in the country, technically it should be fully legal. And stinking weed that anybody ought to be able to grow in their garden, and you can't do it. Not legally. I mean, I don't know how much they're going to come down on you with the way the laws have loosened up, unless you got 100 plants or something, but technically you can't do that. And to me, that is totally plant fascism. I have always been opposed to the government illegalizing plants in any form for private consumption and use. It's insane. a plant here on Earth. If you're religious, you believe God put it there. Otherwise, you believe it evolved here. Whatever you believe, the plant's been here long before governments, long before people, etc., etc. It's insane that a government can say, you can't grow that plant. It's bad plant. It's illegal plant. Isn't that nutty? It's like saying, oh, well, you have curly blonde hair as a person. That's unacceptable. You cannot live on Earth. You're a violation. It's about the same. It's literally. So that's always bothered me. Now, I do believe that the government's job is, controlling industry, regulating commerce, placing taxes, creating permits and structures of laws, and so forth. So when it comes to any product that's manufactured, or any agricultural product that's being sold as a commercial business, regulating businesses, that's the government's business, hey? That's what we need them to do. That's what they're best and worst at. It depends, but yeah, as far as controlling what I can grow in my garden and what I can bring into my house and use for whatever purpose as a plant, okay? Nah, ain't right. People talk about rights. I got my rights. I can't wear a mask. I got my rights. You can't make me have a vaccine. I got my rights. You can't stop me from growing something in my garden. Yeah. So, I really oppose the whole idea. And unfortunately, they're getting it locked up like distillation, like alcohol production. I can get a permit to distill alcohol as a farmer to use for fuel in my tractors and so on. All right, that we can do. But the average American citizen cannot legally produce their own whiskey. And anybody who's familiar with what can happen when a still goes awry, well, you darn well know one good reason why it's regulated. Because if I had a neighbor in a suburban area with a still in the garage and it went up, ooh, I don't want to be around. I don't want to be around. It's a dangerous process. On the other hand, we're allowed to make beer and wine, but hey, beer and wine is a natural process. The Romans didn't even use yeast. They just smashed that stuff with their toes and stuck it in a cask. Whatever yeast was on it naturally produced wine. Perhaps a very poor wine, but nevertheless, it produced wine. That's the one reason the Romans went north. The French had better yeast on their grapes. Would make much better wines than the stuff they had in the South. But yeah, that whole idea, they're comparing cannabis cultivation in the home garden to distillation in the liquor industry, and that's really not the case. Putting a seed in the ground, growing it up, and drying a plant out is not the same as taking sour mash and throwing it in a still and trying to make whiskey out of it. It's not the same process at all. Morally, ethically, there are people out there who see intoxication, becoming intoxicated, as being repugnant, as being morally incorrect, as being wrong. I grew up in a European tradition with a German family where alcohol, beer in particular, was food. This wasn't, a drug. It was food. And so, we had beer and wine around all the time. People drank it all the time. I eventually discovered that that continuous consumption of alcohol does not work for me. Okay, it's not good food. I wouldn't say I'm allergic to it, but it doesn't help me. If I drink alcohol every day, I start to get kind of a sort of a gray state of depression, constant hangover, It's not good for me. And then, of course, beer tends to produce gout symptoms in me, and so the pain is... Yeah, so, I no longer do it, but I no longer do it more because of medical reasons, not because of ethical or moral reasons. I'd drink a couple of beers every day with my meals if I thought I could and it was okay for me. And so when it comes to mild intoxication, it exists throughout the animal kingdom. Humans are not the only ones that want to take in substances that alter their state of consciousness. Animals do it all the time. It's just part of being alive on the planet. Mostly it's mammals, land mammals, I have observed animals around fermented fruit getting completely looped on this stuff and going back for more. Yeah, they know what was happening. They enjoyed being drunk. I've seen black bear. It's frightening. I've seen black bear consume Amanita muscaria in huge quantities. This is that red and white spotted mushroom. I talked about it in a video about elves recently. In the northwest, in the north around the Great Lakes, the mushroom is not red. It tends to be yellow-orange with white flecks. Same mushroom. And my brother and I found a fruiting of that in the woods one time that was so beautiful. We had to run and go get some film for the camera because we were out. We wanted to photograph it. Took us a while. Town was 30 miles off. We got the film. We came back, and every mushroom had been eaten, and every old rotten stump in the woods was beat to death and scattered everywhere, and there were bear prints all over the place. Looked like about a 500-pounder, and he had eaten enough Amanita muscaria to make an elephant high. And the darn bear did it on purpose, So, that said, getting loaded is a normal activity for organisms, and I think sometimes it's pretty handy. I can think of a few people, especially in politics, that really could stand to put a good drunk on and stay there for a while, or smoke a joint. Yeah, be good for them. Take a second look at the laws. When it comes to certain plants that are intoxicating or medical, a lot of times these things that are excellent medicine are also intoxicating. This is the opium poppy. The opium poppy is legal for cultivation in the United States of America, just in case you didn't happen to know that. It is. It's one of the weird loopholes in drug laws because the seed is that little black seed they put on all your rolls and bagels and stuff like that. And so if opium poppy was illegal, you couldn't have seed on your bread. And so you can trade an opium poppy seed. You can plant it in your garden. You can harvest the seed. You can put it on your bread. No one cares. The only thing they won't let you do is take the poppy and turn it into opium. That is not legal under our laws. It's a good painkiller. It has its problems. Yeah, it's addictive. And of course, lately the pharmaceutical companies have made a real mess out of all of that because there was money involved. But again, it's good medicine just as well as being a drug. When it comes to cannabis, when the proposition in California came around to legalize medical purposes for marijuana, I not only assume there were a few, glaucoma was one that's been long known, okay? I'm quite confident that the euphoric aspect and the munchy aspect of cannabis is really good for people with wasting. If you're wasting cancer, or if you're wasting in AIDS, or one of these dreadful things, it's good for you. It's good for you. These are things that I think I did know, all right, but otherwise, I voted for the medical legalization in California, not because of that. I voted because I knew it was going to kick the federal government hard in the chops. That was just going to burn them. Because we go all the way back there, it's about 1971, I believe it was. I was a young man at draft age at the time and so on, and Nixon was in office. And Nixon hated cannabis. Oh, and he hated the people that used it. And so he had commissioned the president's study on cannabis. They called it marijuana in those days, which is politically incorrect, really. But he commissioned this report. And the report came out to the public, and it was printed in a book, and I read it. And I was impressed with the study. I thought it was level-headed, very real. They cited cultures on the planet where the stuff had been used for the last couple thousand years, and how you just couldn't find any major social problems that were associated with the use and so on. And their recommendation to the president was, well, you don't have to legalize it, but let them out of jail and decriminalize the herb. It just isn't socially important. Well, instead, he threw the study in the garbage can and turned around, locked down the borders, and sprayed all the cannabis in Mexico with paraquat and so on and so forth. And his reaction to it, actually what it caused was he caused the domestic cultivation of cannabis. We really didn't have much of it before this. So only when they locked down the importation of the stuff from other places that all of a sudden all of them hippies took their bags of seeds out and went out in the hills in Mendocino, started planting. He started that. Nixon is fully responsible. If you want to know why we grow cannabis in the United States of America today for consumption, thank President Nixon for it. He also caused the cocaine epidemic by making it so difficult to get the cannabis over the border, that people had to be more well-financed. They needed planes, they needed boats, submarines, and so on. They needed to be organized, and so you ended up that cannabis was bulky, not worth very much, and quite perishable. Cocaine was extremely portable, lightweight, high value, and you could seal it up so it'd float in the ocean for quite a while with no trouble. And so it was far more profitable. And so Nixon caused the 80s cocaine epidemic because of his reaction to cannabis during the 1960s and 70s. He also caused the cultivation industry in the U.S. Thank you, Richard. Not for the cocaine epidemic, but for getting things started here. It didn't work. Cannabis is not particularly good for young people. I'm not being discriminatory here, kids, but it's just that when your emotional development and your brain wiring associated and your general learning experience of what we call maturity, some of us never reach that state in life, when that is not quite fully formed and you're still in process, using cannabis is not the best idea, because basically you begin to rely on it. It is psychologically addictive, and you get in an argument with the boss, and instead of going home and trying to figure out how to get this straight, changing jobs or whatever, instead you just go home, you burn one, it goes up in smoke, and it goes circular again the next day, and eventually your brain wires so that this is what you do to deal with the problems you have in your life. If you're an older fart, and you have already gone through all that stuff, and you pretty much got, hopefully relatively healthy patterns established for how to deal with your problems in life, then cannabis for old people is a blessing. The things that I didn't know when California made medical legal have now surfaced, because as people begin to research, look at, experiment with this drug, it's amazing plant. Medically, it's an amazing plant. It helps induce sleep. Many strains do that very well. That's a good thing for old people. We don't sleep so well, It can reduce pain. Some strains are pretty good at reducing pain. And when it's combined with other painkillers in lower doses, it is quite effective sometimes, the synergism. It's a strong anti-inflammatory. And most of what kills us is inflammation. You lose your memory from inflammation. Everything in the body swells. You have inflammation in your joints and so on. Cannabis reduces it. Well, I ran across a new one recently, and it was about the cannabinoid receptors in the hippocampus. We have cannabinoid receptors throughout our body. Our bodies actually produce cannabinoids. They do. That's how natural this stuff is. It's in plants, it's in us too. And when we use the phytocannabinoids, that's the plant-related cannabinoids, they work about the same as the human cannabinoids do. They're produced, in women during childbirth, for instance, we produce cannabinoids. Anyway, there are receptors all over our body for this. The hippocampus has a lot of them. And apparently what happens over time as you age, you begin to lose the cannabinoid receptors in the hippocampus, and the hippocampus shrinks. Recent studies have indicated that senior citizens that use a lot of cannabis don't have a shrunken hippocampus. Okay, it's only the ones that don't use cannabis that the thing keeps getting smaller all the time. I don't know, exactly what the psychological mental effects of a shrunken hippocampus are, but it doesn't sound good. Anytime any part of my brain starts shrinking, I get worried about it. There's a lot of value. There's a lot of medical value. There's a lot of medical value we don't know anything about yet, perhaps, too. Every day they seem to be discovering more and more and more compounds in this plant that we didn't know anything about. So, it's pretty good medicine. It's really good for old people. As far as an intoxicant goes, the recreational aspect of it, I don't think we got a better one on earth. I really don't. You can't poison yourself with the stuff, okay? It does not have a toxic threshold in any reasonable way. You can kill yourself with milk if you drink enough, but no, you could get a sore throat. You smoke too much, you could get a sore throat, all right? But, a lot of these older folks, they eat it anyway. They don't smoke it, but, it's... very few of any kind of negatives around it as far as that's concerned, provided you're not a person who thinks getting intoxicated is wrong. Now, even for the religious, they supposedly ran out of wine at a party where Jesus was, and one of the famous miracles was the conversion of water into wine. Well, I won't go any further into that, but let's just face it. People get loaded when they want to, and it's probably to a certain extent good for us when it's not terribly habitual. I think we need it to get out of ourselves every once in a while. Well, alcohol's not bad, and of course alcohol was a natural. You set a bucket of fruit juice there long enough, it makes alcohol, you get drunk. That's also biblical stories about the first wine. But I don't see anything wrong with that situation. And when it comes to cannabis, there are so few negatives. You can't poison yourself with this stuff. I've never seen anybody throw up from it. I've thrown up from drinking enough in my life. Ordinarily, by the time you start to overindulge with it, it's got a safeguard. You either start choking from smoking too much, or you just plain fall asleep, wake up hours later stoned. So, very safe material. It is really a very, very safe material. When it comes to the social implications, going back to Nixon, for instance, in the study where they said, countries have used this for thousands of years, we just can't see anything has happened. Well, the United States, at least since the 1960s coming forward, we burned a lot of weed. And I honestly don't think some of the worst stuff we see in the streets here has been inspired by the use of cannabis. I've often believed that one of the reasons the government hates the stuff is that if you smoke it, you usually will say, oh yeah, sure, go to war, what for, it reduces motivation, and it tends to reduce aggression too. Very seldom you ever find a stone man wanting to punch you out. No, more like you get kissed. Or they dance around or something, you know. It doesn't, I don't know, how the heck do you run the United States without war, huh? If you haven't got people who want to kill, you want to kill. If you haven't got people who feel that way, you know, get out of bed in the morning and just want to stomp on something, how do you run a war? You know, Putin's having his problems right now, is trying to pull people, you know, out of their jobs and send them out in the field to fight a senseless war that he started over there. And, well, they're not interested. And they didn't even need to smoke much pot, because as we know, the basketball star got tossed in prison over there for carrying ash oil around, you know, something that isn't terribly frowned upon in this country, at least, and in many places it's completely legal. You know, they're going to put her up for 10 years and make her on hard labor. Anyhow, I'm still rather uncertain about these guys out in the street, you know. I had to go through this in my own mind when one of my neighbors with an incredible collection of cannabis seeds asked me, Bill, would you sell cannabis seeds on your website for me? And I said, you know, I don't think I want to go there. I don't know. It has mixed feelings. His collection is beautiful, I'll tell you that. But technically, we would have to claim... See, it's the same problem. I know he hasn't got a medical permit, and so technically the seed he's got is not legal here. So I just don't want to get tied up in it. Don't want to get messed up in all of that. So I told him no. But popping up on the roadside now, selling it. The world is changing quickly, and it's changing weirdly. Pune is very much the Wild West, and a lot of people around here really don't give a darn one way or another how the government feels about things. You know, that's the government's problem. So it is like that. But it's so weird because the laws are so chopped up. It is technically quasi-legal. You know, it is not fully legal, because by federal standards, cannabis cultivation is still Schedule I, and despite the fact, because of industrial hemp, they have allowed the sale of drug cannabis seeds. The seeds have to be coming from sources that supposedly are legal to actually produce them, and we do have, you know, legal growers in places in the United States where they can do that. But both under federal laws and under local laws here, cannabis seed production is the problem. You can sell the stuff, right, Gracie? You can sell it, but if anybody says, well, where'd you get it? I guess if you said, well, I bought it in from a legal source, you know, and I'm just redistributing, I'm just a distributor. If you can prove it out, I guess you're okay. But if you tell the guy, well, I grew it in the backyard, and, you know, best of my knowledge, that does not exist anywhere yet. Hopefully it will. And so, before I sign off here again, all the folks here in Hawaii, and especially here in Puna, because of the bill that was generated from here, is contact your people, in the government. Let them know. Tell them, this is a good thing. Governor Green, the new governor, says he will sign it when it hits his desk. But I worry that by the time they get done fiddling around and chopping it up, that the government will manage to ruin a good thing almost any time. And then, of course, there could be lobbyists involved in this that will sway opinion that counter to what the public needs. In Hawaii, people should be able to garden cannabis legally. We should not be banned from cultivating cannabis when the laws turn to recreational. We don't want to see this turn up like the distillation industry. Alrighty. There you go. Stuff that in your pipe and smoke it. Hang loose.